Hey everybody, welcome to the BoonePod podcast. Today we've got our little guest on here, Joseph Wisnett from Navum.
Yep,
Is that how you say it?
Navum, yeah.
Navum. I'm sorry, every time I say that I want to say Navum just because, I don't know, vroom.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've got this little guy from Navum. He is, I mean, you guys aren't really like a local band, are you? Because you're from down the mountain.
Yeah, we're not from Boone. We're from Hudson-Lenoir area, so about 40 minutes away.
Yeah, so like, the greatest town on planet Earth.
Absolutely.
Hudson, North Carolina.
Oh, the pinnacle of civilization.
Where I am also from.
Yeah.
I'm also from not Boone. Good Lord. I'm from Hudson, North Carolina. But so I've got you on today because you guys make really cool music, even though you've got like one song on Spotify right now.
Right now.
It's from my understanding that you guys used to have a lot more, but you really don't now. What happened there?
Well, we had a full album come out in 2021,
Ooh.
and then we had a little bit of a name change. We had a distributor change. It's a long story, but we are working on an album right now. I'll keep it a little hush hush.
And from what you've told me, you guys aren't going to re-release those versions of the songs you guys originally had on Spotify?
Yeah, so we will be re-recording a couple of the songs, but not all of them. Some of them will kind of stay in our little vault. Some other ones.
The famous Navum Vault.
The Navum Vault, yeah, in 50 years it'll be.
Yeah, 50 years from now, when we're all dead and gone from nuclear radiation,
yeah,
somebody, somewhere on planet Earth will release that original version of the album.
Absolutely.
And are you guys not going to re-record them because you got better audio hardware, or you just didn't like some of the songs, or?
I think part of it was we kind of fell out of love with a couple of the songs. Me in particular, because I feel like I am kind of the de facto leader of our little band.
Your little Three Musketeers, yeah.
Yeah, we are a trio, so it's a little easier to make decisions on behalf of the group, the smaller your band is.
Yeah, you definitely seem like the one that has like your head screwed on the right way.
Yeah.
Compared to the other two people in the band.
Yeah, absolutely.
But so you guys, how's the progress going on re-recording all those songs and putting out your album? What percentage or how close do you think you are?
I would say we're probably at 70%. We've got kind of the bass line done. We went and recorded 3 of the songs in, I think it was July. It was before the semester had started. And then the other 2 members of the band went last month and recorded 3 new songs. And all they need is my bass and my singing.
Yeah, I imagine it's pretty hard for you guys to record since, you live in Boone and the other 2 members live down the mountain in the Lenoir, Hudson area.
Yes.
So I imagine it's really hard to like coordinate. I imagine you guys don't get together in person a lot to record, maybe pretty rarely often. Do you just record stuff and then send it down to them and they work with that, or how's that go?
That's been kind of a new discovery for me. I just recently purchased a MacBook and it comes with a Logic Pro. Well, you can buy Logic Pro on it.
Yeah, you decided to get Logic Pro.
Yeah, and it has been revolutionary in my kind of creative thinking because now I can make stuff with an easy program and I can send it to them and they can tell me, is this good or is this trash? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of helped me.
What were you using before to record your music? Were you just using like free programs like Audacity and all that stuff?
Yeah, we originally started, in 2017 when we started the band, we originally didn't even use recording software. We just put on our phones and we just recorded.
Oh my God, you guys really are like a really entrepreneur band.
We started in the garage essentially, hardcore, and then we moved to Audacity in 2018, and then from then it flourished. We had probably 20 songs that we had, and then we just now started using Reaper, and then that was before we went to the studio. And the mixer. Whoever is there, he's using a different program that I have no idea.
You don't know how to use it, do you?
No idea.
Oh, okay. That's kind of like how I've been recording this podcast. I've really had to like force myself how to learn like Audition and because I know how to use very basically like most of the Adobe suite, like Premiere and a bunch of like Photoshop and all that stuff. But then I had to learn how to use, especially designing the logos and all this stuff for the podcast, I had to teach myself how to use Illustrator and Audacity. Audacity being the bane of my existence because it works for about 3 seconds, crashes, and then you have to reset everything again. But it's going
Yeah.
good now, I think.
Yeah, and it also doesn't help that a lot of recording softwares are very daunting because they just kind of throw it at you.
Yeah, because I imagine going from something like Audacity, which is a free program, I think it's open source
It is.
for anybody to use. And I imagine that's more focused towards a lot of like casual recordings. And then when you move out to stuff like Logic Pro, which is meant for professional music production,
Yeah.
that's when it sort of messes you up because you have to upgrade from like being a casual music guy, I guess, to being someone who's using professional tools
Yeah.
to, I mean, I guess, I don't know, you're not professionally making music. It's something, it's very much like a hobby for you, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it started out being a hobby, but recently I've been saying that we're going to a mixer guy, and we're actually recording in-house at his
Studio?
house, yeah, his studio, and he has a very, very nice studio. And so that's been more of a shift to the professional. But speaking about Audacity, though, they kind of screwed me over a little bit because they don't support MIDI instruments.
Really?
Yeah, and so I bought a MIDI keyboard, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna use this, and it's gonna one up my music making." And then I looked it up, and they don't support.
They don't support it.
No, so then I was like, "Oh,
I'm guessing
man."
Logic does though. Logic
Oh, it
supports.
does.
Okay.
It does. Yeah.
It'd be kind of wacky if this professional music making software didn't have MIDI support.
And it has sampling features too, which is a lifesaver. So it's great. I really do like it.
And I understand that you've been publishing, or I guess putting a lot of your like experimental stuff that you've been making in Logic on like SoundCloud.
Yeah, I have been doing that. I wouldn't put it on Spotify yet, just because I'm already part of my band, and I don't want people to get confused with, oh, is this Navum or is this Joseph, the lead of that band?
I mean, that happens a lot of time with like a lot of big bands, like Queen. I mean, they all recorded their stuff together, and then I think after a while they were taking a break. Freddie Mercury released like a lot of his own stuff under his own name.
Yeah.
And that's what you've been doing on Spotify, right? Like you're not Spotify, your SoundCloud stuff is underneath your name and not Navum.
Yeah, it is. It's underneath my name. Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure that's not what the other members of Navum would make, the kind of stuff you put on your SoundCloud.
Yeah, they would not. So I'm the bassist of the band. I'm also the singer. We have a drummer and a guitarist. The drummer is really, really into Slipknot, heavy metal. It's mostly heavy metal, but he's also all over the place with his influences. And then our guitarist, he is Eddie Van Halen, 100%, all the way. Hard rock, also kind of metal, and he has his influences everywhere as well. And I'm kind of the middle child of them. I like it all, and I take it all in, and I make stuff that kind of fits both of those guys.
So you're almost like the middleman in the band. You're the more reasonable guy in the band, I assume.
I would say so. Yeah, our guitarist is next in line, and then our drummer is insane. He is.
I like the
insane
order.
man.
I like the hierarchy of the band here.
Yeah, you have to put yourself in that.
Oh, okay. You ever thought about adding a fourth member, like Scooby-Doo or something?
We have thought about it because if anyone listening plays an instrument and sings, it is very, very hard to play and sing at the same time. And we thought about having a very charismatic singer.
Like a dedicated
singer.
Okay.
Yeah. We thought about that.
But nothing so far?
Well, it's hard to do with our schedules because the other two members work full-time, and I'm a student full-time an hour away. Makes it very hard to get together and do that kind of stuff.
And I imagine now that because how long have you guys been working on music for? How long have you guys been like officially a band?
Since about 2017, we originally were called the Voyagers for a long time until 2021 actually, whenever we had the name change and stuff.
Wasn't it that some other band had the name the Voyagers and you had to change it because they'd been a band longer or something?
Yeah, so the way it works is we have a distributor that distributes our music onto the streaming platforms like Apple Music and Spotify. And there was another band that was called the Voyagers, and they had, I think, 20,000 monthly listeners, and we had maybe 50. And they kept putting our music on their page. And we were trying to fight that. We were like, why is this happening? And we called them, and we tried to email them, and we wouldn't get anything back. So then finally we just kind of sunk down, defeated. Let's just change our name. Let's get a new distributor. Let's start from scratch. We're going to get new mics, new instruments, and it's going to be a whole new band. We're going to do great.
So like a remastered version of the Voyagers, I
Yeah,
guess.
we came up from the ashes.
Like a phoenix born again.
Like a phoenix, exactly.
Even though the phoenix hasn't borne many feathers yet, but you know.
We're getting there.
Isn't the only song on your Spotify right now like isn't it like a prelude to a song that's going to be on the eventual album release?
Yeah, it is a prelude. Yeah, it was the only song that I could kind of get around the really bad production of, because that song was an instrumental and it didn't have many instruments in it, so you couldn't really tell it was recorded really roughly. The other songs, you could really tell.
You could tell it was like a very amateur production.
Very amateur, yeah, because we mixed, we wrote, recorded, mixed, and mastered all of our songs. And, you know, of course, us being three uneducated dudes, we could not do that appropriately. And it sounded very amateurish. And I'm not embarrassed of it, but I know now we could do better.
So you're like it. So you don't want to put out your stuff that was done before you knew you could do better.
Absolutely, and I wish you guys could hear the jump in quality at the studio we're at now. It is astonishing how good.
Maybe what you should do is that you guys should dig deep into that Navum vault and find those original recordings and maybe upload them onto like YouTube or something. As maybe like older versions of these songs so other people could hear that jump in quality. Because if you don't have that, you know, those original recordings, you can't get really like a basis for how much better you guys have gotten.
That is true. That is true. We do have the original recordings. It's on a flash drive. Our drummer has it.
Oh, that's real secure.
Well,
It's not on somebody's computer. It's on a random flash drive.
I also have a CD of it.
Oh, yeah, I remember you telling me that you have a CD of it.
Yeah, it's in my car right now. I listen to it every once in a while. I show people randomly.
Just like, hey, listen to my old stuff. This is what we used to make.
Yeah, and sometimes they're like, "Wow, that's great." Sometimes it's a, "Wow, that's great." In a kind of a what's the word? Not a very nice tone.
Yeah. Because it's really hard. Because when I was doing research for this episode, you know, I was going through your Instagram, all that stuff. It's really hard to find where you guys have like come from because none of those recordings are up on the internet anymore. And even on your Instagram, none of your Instagram is like really like, hey, here's our songs. Listen, it's mostly just like behind the scenes stuff of with the band.
Yeah.
So preparing for this podcast, I couldn't really like. There was only one song on Spotify for me to listen to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, we're hoping we're doing an EP right now. It's not a full album. The last album that's been, you know, erased from history, it had, I think, 12 songs on it. It was a pretty beefy endeavor.
That's pretty long for an album.
And we spent a whole year on it, on and off. I wasn't there all the time, and it was hard for us to get together, you know, because working full-time and I'm a student.
Yeah, imagine with all of your different schedules, because, you know, two of the members work full-time, you're a full-time student. I imagine that is a near impossible schedule to find any off time for any of you.
Yeah.
Unless you don't plan it like months ahead.
It is sometimes months, and the only really good time I have is during the summer. And over the summer, actually.
Yeah. Maybe during like school breaks and stuff.
Over the summer, I went down the mountain to be with them and to work on some of our music.
Yeah, that's what you were telling me. You moved down the mountain for a few months just to record music.
Just to do that. And we got a lot done, and I think it was very good, but it was very hard for me because sometimes, you know, they weren't there, and I would be there by myself just making stuff. And it's hard to get their input if they're not there.
Yeah, I imagine recording music by yourself if you're in a band. Because, I mean, I'm not in a band, but what I imagine happens is that when you're working on music, you, like, bounce stuff off of each other. Like, oh, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about this? Or maybe you should change this note or whatever. So I imagine it's really hard when you're working by yourself to have that sort of input without, you know, them coming upon it like a few days later or something.
And it's also so hard to make something that you feel so proud and so dear about, and for the other members to be like, I'm not really feeling that. I don't like that very much. There's this quote I read by Tame Impala, and he's a solo man. He does all of his stuff.
Yeah,
He's
contrary to popular belief, Tame Impala is just one guy.
one guy. Well, he makes all this stuff. He doesn't, actually play it live by himself. But he says, the more members you add, the more creativity they take away from you, and that's true. And you kind of have to deal with that double-edged sword of, I really like this, but will I have to change it for someone else to make them happy?
Has it been sort of freeing? Because I know you were telling me just a second ago that you were working on music and Logic. Has it been sort of freeing to work on that kind of music and Logic and make just whatever you want?
It has been freeing. It's been difficult to learn the program, and that in itself has kind of hindered my ability. But, once you get over that hump and you kind of see the doors open all around you, and it's a beautiful thing. It really is.
Yeah, I imagine it's a really hard learning curve going from, recording stuff in Audacity to going to Logic Pro, which, it's a program meant for like professional music production.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's where the rapper Logic got his name from. I think, don't put me in a textbook on that one. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure, But I imagine it was a very hard learning curve. But I imagine once you spend a few more months on it, learning, watching YouTube tutorials, all that stuff.
Oh, that's been my lifeblood.
Oh, yeah. Every waking second you're watching it when you're not working on homework.
Yeah, I'd be like, how do I do this? And YouTube has the answer for me. And I'm like, thank you so much.
That's how it's been for me learning, Audacity. I mean, I'm not doing as much music production as you, obviously. But I am, learning how to record, getting the mic to work, learning how to do all that stuff, make the audio actually sound good. Because, if you just record audio straight without editing it, you're going to hear background noise, clicks in the background, noises that, maybe I don't want people listening to this to hear. Like, I want it to be like a clean recording, not like some amateur, random audio file that I uploaded on YouTube.
Audacity level quality.
I'd like to put like a little more audio production into it than that. But, it's definitely a learning curve, but I think it's very rewarding to learn.
I agree. Kind of in the same vein as making music is, I think having a podcast is also another creative outlet someone could take, to be happy.
I mean, it's that, and then, maybe it's a little more greedy option for me. There's not many. I think there is one other active podcast in Boone right now, and I think it's made by the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm not sure how many people listen to that. But honestly, it's like the main reason for me making this podcast is that I want to highlight and show off local musicians, creatives, whatever. Basically, just anybody that makes anything cool. I want to put them on a pedestal and be like, here, you guys look at this. Because for me, something I've thought about a lot is that a lot of local bands and a lot of local creatives, especially in a college town, are very, like, it's almost like a fleeting art form, especially for local college bands. Because most of the time, like 95% of the time, after the members of a local college band graduate, they usually stop making music.
Yeah.
I mean, some very lucky people that maybe like they get really popular in college, their Spotify pops off. It's like they'll keep making music after college. Maybe they'll pursue that. But most bands, especially like most local creatives, when they graduate, they fully stop making music. So especially local bands and especially college bands are like a very local temporary art form. It's almost like it's like a campfire, right? It burns. I guess maybe thermite would be better. Is that it burns really, really hot for
a fleeting moment.
For a fleeting moment, these bands are maybe making music for a few years, right? And then as soon as they graduate college, the fire burns out. Maybe later on they'll come back and maybe record some other stuff, but that's not very likely, I think, because most people after college, they've moved on.
Or move away.
That's more importantly, I think that's it. They move away, they move on, they go into the career of choice that they went to college for, and then they just end up never touching this music again, and just looking back on it like fondly, being like, "Hey, I made this back in college. This is something I fondly think of," which is why I really want to get these people on these podcasts and talk to them, so people years from now can come back and listen to this, or even the people in the band themselves can come back and listen to this and be like, oh yeah, we did make music in college. I'm really proud of that. And I want to show other people this.
Like, this is where we were at
Yeah.
that time.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Because that's something that I like to do a lot. I really like looking back on old stuff that I've made, which is, part of the reason why I archive and keep everything.
Mm-hmm.
I've kept every single file that I've ever made since middle school. I have it somewhere. I may not be able to locate. The middle school stuff is really hard to find, but I know I have it somewhere. But, like, I like keeping that stuff and looking back on it. Like, even older YouTube videos that I look back on now, they're, like, really cringy. Even if they are really cringy and I have to pause every 10 seconds.
To let the cringe kind of flow.
Yeah, you have to let it wash over you. But, like, I like going back and looking at that stuff.
That's something you touch on that. That's something I regret. Being a musician, like there are some things that I have made, way back in the day, probably 2015 or 2016, that I've just deleted, and I have no idea what they were, and that's one of my biggest regrets as being a musician, not having access to the older things that I've made.
The old Wisnet lost recordings.
I know. I shudder every time I think about it, of what could have been.
Yeah. I guess it's just a thing for me. I just like keeping everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same time, if you do that, you have to have like the proper amount of storage. Like the amount of hard drives or flash sticks I have are insane.
I can't imagine.
It's hard to keep that amount of data in one place. And especially like if, a lot of the stuff, I don't have a lot of the stuff backed up anywhere. Like I'll have it on one hard drive, but then I don't I don't have it kept anywhere else. So I do have to get better on that. But, maybe for the people listening out there, keep all that old stuff. You may not like keeping it now, but I definitely maybe 5-10 years from now, if you still have it somewhere, plug it in, look at it, look at the old drawings you made, old pictures you took. Yep. So I keep every single photo on my phone, unless it's some stupid, picture of here's a picture of a test that I took. I probably won't keep that, or maybe I will. I don't know, but stuff like that I wouldn't keep. But all those cool old drawings you made. Maybe drawings you made in preschool, go get that stuff digitized or scanned so you can have it somewhere.
Yep.
And, enough about that. Enough about how crazy I am about archiving things. One thing I wanted to ask you is where, because you told me you lost recordings of music you made in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you get, what made you want to start making music?
Oh, that's a big question. And it's kind of complicated for me because I grew up not really liking music, not even listening to music. It was just kind of a thing that was in the car. And,
You just didn't listen to music.
Yeah, and that is insane thinking back now. Because, music is such a dear thing to me, and it's such a big part of my life now. It's probably 50% of who I am at this point. But it started, I would say maybe when I was 9 or 10. My mom was really trying to get me into piano. I think every young man that was 10 years old, their mom was like, you need to play the piano. Just, it's like the sports thing.
Or some kind of instrument.
It's like the sports thing for every kid. I went through that phase when I was, 10 or below. It was a music thing from then on. So my mom got this really, really nice weighted keys piano. And it was at her apartment because there was some stuff with my biological dad. It's a long story. But she got me this piano to kind of put all of my frustration into something I could do. And that was what really started my blossoming into who I am now. Kind of that $800 weighted keys black piano. That was it. That's when it started. And then I got a guitar a couple years later when I was probably 13. And for those of you that don't know, I'm a lefty. Well, I'm actually mixed-handed, but I play lefty instruments. I write righty.
So you're weird.
Weird. It is weird. I know it's weird. So I got a righty guitar. It was a really terrible, Japanese-made, tiny little guitar. And it was righty. And I learned to play it backwards, kind of like, Jimi Hendrix did that in the 60s.
I did not know that.
He did. Well, earlier, he had a righty model guitar. And then he switched the strings, which I didn't do that because I didn't know how to do that at the time. But I learned it backwards. And then I got a real guitar for I think it was my 16th birthday. And then that is when it really happened. for me getting into the band because I started playing guitar. My friend Jonathan, who is our drummer now, he was like, "Hey, me and this other guy have a little thing going, a little duo. How would you like to play bass?" And I didn't know what a bass was at that point. I only really knew the guitar and the drums. And bass is like this beautiful melding of both of them. It's melodic, yet it's rhythmic. And I started playing that, and I was awful at it for so long. And then I think in 2019 or 2020, it kind of blossomed for me. And, it exploded in my head. I was like, wow.
So during quarantine.
Yeah, quarantine, I think it was hard on all of us, and we all had to do something to pass the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, I was kind of sick before quarantine, but when I got out of being sick, I really started picking up the bass and started being super serious, and that was kind of when it blossomed. I was also in band in my middle school and high school
No, hey, me
years.
too.
Oh, you were?
Yeah. I mean, I played, like, baritone. Okay, well, I started off playing trumpet, and then around, I think it was in 7th grade, maybe halfway through 7th grade, my band teacher came over to me, and she was like, "Hey, do you want to switch from trumpet to baritone?" And I'm like, at the time, I was like, "Yeah, sure." Looking back on it, I don't know if it was because I was bad at playing trumpet or, I think we really only did have, like, one baritone. So it might have been a combination of the two. I don't know. But then from the halfway through 7th grade onwards, I played baritone. And then I really enjoyed it. I was first chair baritone. But I, like after 8th grade going into high school, the high school I went to didn't have band. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, even if I did go to high school that did have a band, I didn't continue it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to because I just wasn't interested at the time.
Yeah. It's a different atmosphere kind of going into high school band. Like, for example, I'm not a classically trained musician in the fact that I can't really read sheet music. I used to, but not anymore.
You just play by ear, mostly?
That's how I learned to play guitar. I learned by ear, and that kind of made it difficult to do anything in the high school band. Because I played trombone in middle school and, like, my sophomore year, up to sophomore year of high school. Then I dropped it because I moved to school. I'd moved schools, and it was complicated. So then when I got into the next high school, I joined the percussion, the drum line, and that was addicting to me. I adored every second of it. I'm very nostalgic for the drums in my marching band that I was in.
I know a few people that were in marching band. It sounded horrible because it sounds like you're waking up at the break of dawn, practicing, sweating your ass off.
The sweating is true. I will admit that. I never went to, like, the band camp beforehand where we got up at, like, 5 a.m. and did drills outside in the parking lot. That was never my shtick. I played the tenors, which are the quad drums, like the cool ones, essentially.
Yeah.
They're the really cool ones.
You said tenors, and I'm like, I do not know what those are.
Oh, no, they're... Like, you have the snare drum, which is, you know what snare drum is. And then you have the big booming bass, and then you have the 4 quads, or the 4
You
drums.
played the main event of the drums, basically.
There were only 3 of us, and I was one of the 3 my first year there, and I'm so proud of that to this day.
Oh, okay.
I'm very proud of it.
So another thing I wanted to ask you. So you've talked about how just a second ago, you were talking about how your friend John asked you to be in the band, this little duo thing that gotten on. How long, like, when did you guys, like, how did you meet John? And then how did the band start?
Well, I'd met Jonathan in my 8th grade year. We were both very weird. I was a super weird middle schooler. I look back on those days with just cringe. And
I think most people do.
And that makes me feel better.
Because I think, honestly, like, no normal person looks back at, like, maybe how they were 8th grade, freshman year of high school. And
I was
they're
the
like,
coolest.
Yeah, nobody looks back and they're like, oh, I was the coolest guy ever. No. Most of the time people think about it, they're like, they shiver with how cringe they were.
Yeah.
I know I do.
But John was really the catalyst to get me into more than just, like, the classic dad rock of the day, because my mom was really into, like, the 80s pop, 80s rock, which a lot of people are.
Yeah.
It's good music.
I feel like that's how most people our parents' age are. They're kind of stuck in that one era.
Genre.
They're stuck in that one era of music.
Yeah, and John was one of the first people. He was the first person to really broaden my horizons, because Well, for one, he lived in the middle of nowhere, and it scared the shit out of me whenever I saw him for the first time because it was like a cabin in the woods level, terrifying. And he pulls out, I mean, this guy had probably a stack up to my waist of CDs. And he pulls out one that I think it was either Rush or it was Disturbed. And he put it in, and my ears exploded, and it was like, wow. It was a wholly different experience.
Is that what got
for me.
you started on Rush? Because from what I understand, you are like a Rush fanatic.
Well, yeah, the thing is, anyone who knows Rush or Paul McCartney is that, well, Paul McCartney's a lefty, but they both play bass, and they both sing, and they're very good at it. And I took a lot of inspiration from those musicians. And Geddy Lee, who is the singer of Rush, he plays bass with his feet as well. He has a keyboard on his feet, and he sings and plays and does it with his feet. And that...
I don't know, like, how multi-threaded is his brain to be able to do that? That is multitasking on a different level.
He is not human. He's a cyborg or something. He's amazing. He's
an industry plant created by the CIA.
He's a super soldier, but super musician. But Jonathan knew Devin. Devin is our guitarist now. They had known each other since, I want to say kindergarten or first grade, because they go back a long way. And John kind of was playing with him a little bit in a little band they had. They called themselves DJ because Devin's name is Devin, John's is John. You see,
I'm guessing you guys were pretty young. I'm guessing none of that music's probably lost.
Well, I heard. Okay, I'll tell you
this. Oh, little secret here.
I'll tell you a secret,
Ooh.
yeah. I heard when they wanted to get me in the band, I was brand new to the bass. I didn't know anything. A couple months before they had introduced me, they asked me to be their bassist. They played at a little gig, and I think it was Marion, which is a little bit to the southwest of where we grew up.
Not a very important town.
Not really.
I've been to Marion. It's okay.
Average.
It is a very average town.
It's fine, yeah. But apparently they played at this little bar. I mean, they had a good crowd going.
How old were they this point?
They had to have been probably 15 or 16.
Oof.
Young. And Devin, I don't know if I've told you this, but he has been playing guitar since he was probably 5 years old. He's very gifted, very good guitarist. Jonathan just started drums like probably a year prior because he got a drum set for his birthday. Or I think it was maybe Christmas. I don't remember for sure. But he had just started playing. And if any of you listening have heard of Rock Band, the game, the program, essentially, it has like the if you hit one of the snares, it has a little dot, and you hit the toms, there's dots. It's like Guitar Hero, but for drums.
Is this how he learned how to play the drums?
He uses it to this day, even to learn new songs, which is.
I don't know how effective is that?
Terrible.
Okay.
But in one
That's
way,
what I figured, yeah.
In one way, it's genius because he has kind of developed his own sight reading. Because he can play a song he's never heard before instantly, perfectly.
So he can play any song if it's like, if the sheet music looked like Guitar Hero, he can play it. But if it's like a traditional thing, he can't?
Oh, yeah, he'd be lost. I'd be lost, too. Because
can any of you in the band read sight music?
Sheet music?
Yeah, sheet music.
I can read a minimal amounts because I haven't done it in years. But Devin has no idea, and
so basically, all of you are playing by ear 99% of the time.
Yeah. Well, Devin he had a guitar teacher and kind of mentor, and he taught him the scales, the Mixolydians, the DeLorean, or not DeLorean, not the DeLorean.
That's something different.
Mixolydian, he taught him all of the scales, and he knows his way around the fretboard like it's no one's business. But anyway, back to the Guitar Hero Rock Band thing. Apparently, they were playing. It might have been Jesse's Girl, or it was some song.
Now, wait, was one of them singing, or were they just playing an instrumental?
Instrumental.
Okay.
But Jonathan, the way his drums were set up, it was the big bass drum at the bottom, and there were two poles that held up the toms. He had his phone in between the toms and was watching it as he was playing on stage.
No way!
I swear. He did that.
I can't tell if that's the coolest thing ever or the dumbest thing
Well,
ever.
hold on.
That sounds so cool.
It would have been cool if the phone didn't fall and he got completely lost, didn't know where it was going.
Oh no.
And it was
Were they only playing that one song?
I'm not sure, but that's the only part of it I know for sure that had happened. So yeah, it was something. I'll tell you what.
I wonder if anybody has any recordings out there of that.
Oh,
That would be fantastic. I would love to see that.
I'll have to look into it and I'll get back to you. But then a couple months after that, Jonathan, I had not known Devin very well at all at this point, but John was like,
You guys were just like acquaintances.
Yeah,
At this point.
well, me and John were good friends. Me and Devin were not, so we kind of had different friend groups. But John was kind of the middle.
John was like the binding factor.
He was the binder, yeah. He was the catalyst to get us all together. But John was like, hey, we really need a bassist, and I think you'd be a good fit. And I was like, okay, sure, because I like making music. I think it's cool.
And here you are, never playing the bass before in your life.
And I pick it up, and it is atrocious the first couple of months. Like any new hobby, especially a musical instrument.
You're going to be pretty bad at it for a while.
Yeah, I remember, if anyone listening plays guitar, our first song we played was Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. That's like a pretty much a universal starting. And, it's the first fret on the E and then the first fret on the A, and then I think it's the fourth fret on the E and then fourth fret on the A. I, for the life of me, could never do that because it's such a big jump on the fretboard. And I can distinctly remember we were in a tiny little room, and we were all just so bad.
But you were all bad together.
Together, yeah. Devin was probably the most proficient starting out, and we've all grown. It's kind of incredible. I have some videos on my phone of us playing back then, and like, wow, looking back on it now, the amount that we've grown is insane to see.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, you guys, from what it sounds like, you guys have been working on music for years.
Yeah.
How would you, so I know for people that are listening right now, it may be hard for them to get like a kind of basis idea of what kind of music you guys make. How would you describe the kind of music you guys make right now? Especially since all of the old stuff is in the Navum vault.
The vault, sealed away.
Sealed away forever.
I would say it's predominantly like an alt rock. We have metal influences. Clearly, Jonathan, he goes crazy on the drums a lot of times, and we have a little bit of pop because I like a lot of the '80s pop, and that influence kind of gets meshed in. So it's kind of a jumble of like '80s, '90s alt rock, grunge, hard rock, like a big conglomerate of all of those. But I think we kind of meld them well. They mesh well together.
How would you describe the music you make on your own, though? Because from what I've heard, a lot of the music you guys make as a band and the music you make solo are very different.
Vastly different.
They're very different.
Yeah. Well, part of it's because I am not a very proficient guitar player, and I like a lot of metal guitar riffs. I think it's a very powerful instrument. But the way I have my kind of interface set up, my guitar is awful. It sounds so terrible. So I've kind of but I've now started to make kind of not synthwave, but kind of 80s synth, but mixing like kind of a rock drums, a little bit of a arpeggiated bass, kind of like the 80s. That's what I'm making right now.
So it's kind of like you're kind of doing your own thing here. It's hard, from what I've heard from your music, it is pretty hard to like lock down into one specific genre. A lot of your music that you made solo, a lot of it sounds like stuff, just any idea, like any inkling of an idea you've thought of, you're like, hey, this would sound good, and then you just make it.
That is pretty much my creative process. I'll be in the shower, and then I'll hear this thing in my head, and I'll be like, wow, that sounds really cool. And I'll start with that.
And then you've run out of the shower immediately working on the music.
No pants on, soaking wet, on my computer, and I'm just going ham pretty much the whole time. But I start with that little idea, and then I kind of build everything around it. A lot of musicians, they start with kind of the drums or the bass, and then they go with the melody. I go melody first because that's the first
And
thing.
then add on drums and all that stuff later.
Melody is the first thing that I will lose if I don't put it in first.
Okay.
So that's how I kind of keep my thoughts organized. I go melody first, and then I do all the other stuff kind of comes naturally.
Oh, okay. And I know you were talking about Tame Impala earlier, who, is just one guy, and he doesn't play any of his music live without help.
Yeah.
When did you guys start doing actual live shows?
That was much later. That's only been a kind of a recent thing.
Like within the past year or two?
Past year or two, yeah. We really wanted to do live stuff before, kind of in the Lenore Hudson area, but it's very hard to get a venue there if you're not already established. And three goobers from Lenore will have a really hard time competing against a Statesville band that kind of tours around the area. So it's been really hard for us to get live shows, especially one, the venues here are insane. They get gone so quick, and it's really hard to get them. And there's the lack of proximity towards the other band members. Like, we're not near each other, and that makes it really hard to kind of get together.
Yeah, and I can also imagine, because Lenore is very much a city of old people. It is very much one of those towns, kind of a rural town in North Carolina that is very much full of older people who are 40 and up, and then all of the young people, they go to high school there, and then they leave.
They get out, yeah.
That's the vibe of the town. So imagine, first of all, there probably aren't that many venues in the first place in Lenore.
Yeah.
And then I imagine even then, a lot of them probably aren't interested in some local indie band.
Yeah.
Because I imagine a lot of the bands and stuff that are in North Carolina right now, not in North Carolina, but in Lenore, are kind of just like, they're people that are only really interested in maybe local country bands or maybe 80s rock cover bands. I imagine that's what 99% of the bands in Lenore are.
It is, like, I would say 85% is the 80s rock cover bands by men that are in their probably 40s, and they're just, and I respect it because, I mean, I might be that way, and I don't want to be cynic.
But I don't know,
them.
you sound, the way you make your music and like your musical creative process, I feel like you as a person don't like lend very well to just doing covers of stuff because you have so many ideas for music you want to make.
Yeah, it would feel inauthentic of me to just blatantly copy other people because I want to stand out. I want people to see my creative vision. And
you don't want to blend in music.
I really don't. Well, it's a fine line to walk.
Yeah, it's really hard to not blend in because if you blend in, you might get some popularity. But then if you go too far off to where you don't blend in,
nobody likes
it would
you.
be hard to attract people to listen to your music because maybe it might be too far from what people want to listen to.
Yeah, too niche, too zany. And that's, I kind of have to veer myself out of that because I want to add so much stuff. But it would sound like a nightmare if I put all the things I wanted.
Yeah. So when did you guys start playing live music? Like, do you remember what your first live show was?
Oh, man, I
imagine your first live show was as the Voyagers and not Navum.
It was as the Voyagers, yeah. I don't even want to tell you this, but I will. Our first truly live show were 3 talent shows at our high school.
I mean, I feel like that's where every band, like every small indie band gets their start, right?
And
they played a talent show.
And I will tell you, the humblest of beginnings, starting from there, because it was the same year that I'd actually first picked up the bass guitar.
Oh.
And it was I think it was maybe the second year John was playing drums, and he was still really reliant on that Rock Band thing, on the Guitar Hero thing. And there are videos somewhere. I have erased them from my memory. I don't know who has them.
Atrocious. Would your parents have them maybe?
Maybe. I can tell you our first performance was of a medley of 80s rock songs.
Okay. Do you remember all the songs that you played?
So I think there was probably a riff of 10 seconds of probably 8 or 9 songs. I know we started out with Back in Black, and it was that opening riff, and then we went to Guns N' Roses. We had a Fleetwood Mac tune in there, which I was pretty happy with because this was my first favorite band. And then we had Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult. That was one of the riffs in there. And we actually had put it together. It's an original. And looking back on it, I'm very impressed we were able to do that because it was a pretty advanced thing to be able to meld all of these songs with different BPMs.
All that many melodies into one song.
Different tempos, and it was almost seamless looking back. But that was the first talent show. And the second one was, I think, arguably worse, in my opinion, because we did a cover of a Van Halen song called I'm the One.
I've never heard this song, so I don't know what it sounds like.
It's super fast, and it's in all Van Halen songs are in the key of, I think it's E sharp or E flat, I believe. It's a half step down from standard tuning. And not only is it hard to play because on the bass, if you transpose, it becomes different on the guitar. But David Lee Roth's singing voice is astronomically high, and he kind of screams. And I'm not a very good screamer when I sing. And so I blacked out. I don't remember anything about it. But I know I went for it. I Brett Favre'd it. I threw it, Hail Married, not in my prime, missed it completely, I know I did. But that was our second one. And then we came back the third year. We did an original. That was actually on the first album we made. We did a instrumental from there, and we rocked the house. I feel like it was really good. We got second place.
Who won? Who was first place?
Well, the first year it was some country artist, which of course makes sense.
Yeah, especially for the area, yeah.
The second one was a play, which I was really impressed. And we were really awful the second year. So the play, I think, would have won regardless. And then the third year, I don't know who won. But those were our first live shows, and those were in 2016, 17, 18. I believe it was kind of in that order. But the other live show we did was in August. No, I'm sorry, it was in June of this year, June of 2022. We played at a little bar called Liquid Roots in Lenoir. And we pulled a pretty big crowd.
Was this like your first live show out in the wild?
Out in the wild, yeah. That was our first. We were a studio band for a while because we lived closer back then, but it was still kind of hard because one of our members was working all the time. Hard to get, especially it was the drummer, John. He was working all the time. And it's really hard to play drums if you don't have drums in the house where he's at because he wasn't there. So that was our first real show out in the wild.
And then, what did you do? Did you do many more shows after that?
No, because really right after that we started going to that studio and we started recording all of the songs that we want to put on our next EP. We did that in June and July, and then they just went back in September and started.
Oh, okay. So. And then I imagine after that, because of COVID and all that, it was really hard. I mean, I imagine then it would be near impossible to do any live shows, and I'm sure you wouldn't even want to.
Oh yeah, when COVID was happening, that wasn't even in our thoughts because then at that point we hadn't had any music out, and we really wanted to kind of get our thoughts onto paper, and we wanted to start writing music. So it was really after COVID, well not after COVID, but a year after 2021 when we were like
when it had calmed down.
Yeah, I think it was August of 2021 when the first album came out. And then we were like, okay, now we've got to go out and we've got to start playing shows to kind of promote this. But that never really happened. School stuff came up for me. I'm going to be a teacher, so I have to be at other schools all the time.
That'll definitely be a really cool story for your students. Like, hey, I'm in a band.
I'm in a band, yeah. So
that's something I don't think you tell your students until like the end of the year. Like, that's what you tell them at the end of the semester when you're done teaching them.
Yeah, and
you're like, hey, here, fun fact, I was in a band.
Fun fact, yeah, here you go, guys.
Yeah.
Send them on their way.
What do you think? So I know you've been living in Boone for a few years now, for a little while now.
Yeah.
What do you think of the local music scene? Have you heard any local bands? Like, what do you think of them?
It's been inspiring, honestly. I didn't go to see many of the local bands here until, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago. I was busy doing schoolwork a lot of the time, but I recently I think it was the 1st of September, we went to, me and a group of my friends went to Legends, and we saw Sloth and Felspar, who are two local
Oh, hey.
bands.
I was at that show too.
Oh, you were at that show?
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, they were really good. I'd never heard any of them before. So that was like my
Yeah.
first interaction with them because I had seen, because they had a post on, I think, the App State website for it.
Oh.
And I just seen that and I was like, oh, cool, two local metal bands. I want to see that.
Yeah, I know my friend John, because he's, that metal,
Mm-hmm.
he's the metal king. He loves metal. He was like, I saw where, these bands are going to play. So we made a little band. We all got together and we went and we saw them. And it was really good. I was inspired. It made me a tad envious, I'm not going to lie. But I also was very proud of them in a way, because it's hard, especially here, to get good venues.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how much it is. I don't know how long Felspar and Sloth have been playing for. That's something I haven't looked that much into. I really don't know how long they've been playing. But for at least the show, they seemed really well put together. And they've got a pretty active little following on like Spotify and all that stuff.
Which is great. I mean, that's all you could ask for as a musician here.
They seem to be really popular on social media like Instagram and that stuff too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know I think you guys only have like, what, a YouTube and an Instagram, I think?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know you guys haven't really posted that much on there.
Yeah, well, it's all in the making. I mean, stuff is coming. It's kind of being drip fed a little bit.
It's the kind of thing where it's like, it's done when it's done.
Absolutely. And
Like, you guys aren't trying to rush the process or anything.
yeah, I mean, well, I was trying to rush it over the summer, but we got a lot done, and
Were you just trying to rush because you're like, hey, I go back to school in the fall. I want to get this stuff done.
I'll be busy, So, and they understood, and we worked. We tried our hardest, and we got a lot done. So I imagine we're going to be completely done with it maybe around like the December kind of area. I don't want to say November because we still have to go and finish some stuff up.
Record all that, mix it and everything.
Mix it, and we have to get some album art. We've got a lot to do. It's a lot coming down the pipeline.
But it'll eventually be here. It'll be done when it's done.
It will, and I will not let it be heard unless I don't feel good about it. So it's going to be leaps and bounds better than what we have made before.
Okay. Would you guys be interested in, like, maybe playing a local show up here? I mean, if you could ever find the time.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There's something just so exhilarating about playing live and having people enjoy your music. It's a feeling you can't describe to someone without them already knowing what it feels like.
Yeah, because I imagine, especially in Boone, with a town which, like, 95% of its population is young college students, they're going to be a very active crowd, especially if you're really good. You get their hearts pumping, their adrenaline going, all that stuff. But from what you've told me, it is very, like, the band scene around here, especially for getting shows, is extremely competitive.
It is.
Because it seems like there's about 1 million local bands up here. There's a few that are going to rise to the top, but I imagine it is extremely competitive.
It is. It is super challenging, and they all get filled up. They, like you said.
Because I imagine most venues that host these bands probably are going to more likely take the band that they've hosted before, like 3 or 4 times, bands that they know people like. And then because they know if they're bringing those people, that's more sales for them. Like if it's at a bar, more drinks, more merch sales, whatever.
And also think about the music genre they're playing. Like a lot of metal or like really, really hard rock, they don't get as much exposure as like the pop and the kind of pop rock. And no shade to the pop rock scene. I love pop rock and I love metal and all of those genres. But it's just kind of that, I think it's a unconscious bias for employers, not employers, but like people that run the bars. They want to have something that's pretty commercialized, something that's easy to listen to. And, then you have the bands that are pop rock, they get more venues.
Okay. Yeah, because I imagine that, especially in a town like Boone, since it is a college town, I feel like Boone is really good for some reason at, like, making creatives. People who do, like, any kind of art, like music, photography, art, whatever. I feel like what I've definitely seen out of the music scene is definitely, there's really only 2 genres of music that come out of Boone. It is metal and bedroom indie pop. That is what is it's a split down the middle of what kind of music comes out of Boone, especially among the younger population, because from what I find, all of the local bands that are from college students, they're not, they're not country, they're not like normal pop. They're not like there's like really only two emerging genres in Boone.
Yeah, that's incredibly apt comparison because that's all I've really ever seen. I have seen some kind of country-esque songs. Like for example, a couple months ago, I went to a little. It looked like a frat house, but they had like a little band playing there, and it was like a revolving act. So the first act was kind of a pop rock. Second act was one man with a guitar with a cowboy hat, and he was just going. And
was he singing or was he just playing instrumentals?
Oh, he was singing, and he was a country king. It was amazing.
Because I know, like, I'm sure there are a lot of local musicians who like maybe play music and don't, put any of their stuff on anything. Like nobody, they don't upload it to YouTube or Spotify or SoundCloud or whatever. Because I know there are a lot of like small house shows that maybe these people go to.
Yeah, that was the one I went to. It was a house show. Yeah.
So, and I imagine a lot of people you listen to probably, they probably don't upload any of their stuff, which is a shame because I want people to hear it. Yeah. It's like the whole point of this podcast is that I want people to hear, like this really cool stuff. Because one of the things I've noticed, because there are a few articles from the student-led newspaper, the Appalachian. I saw one article on their website where they were like, hey, here's some cool local bands. And I think one thing that inspired me was there was one band on that playlist that was from Boone that got started in 2013. And if you check their Spotify now, they literally have 2 million monthly listeners.
Wow.
I think they're called Rainbow Kitten Starfire or something.
Oh, they're from here.
Yeah. They're from Boone, but they have like 2 million monthly listeners. And they have a tour schedule, like they're touring. I think they just had a show in Poland, I think.
Wow.
But they're really cool. But then all of the other musicians were small, local university bands.
Yeah.
That, I don't know, I checked out all of their Spotifys and most of them, 90% of them, had stopped uploading music late, like the middle of last year. And I know it's probably like either because, the band broke up, they don't like each other anymore, or like, they graduated.
Yeah.
That's the more like simple answers. They probably graduated and they stopped making music.
Yeah.
But it's really sad for me to see all these bands with so much talent that just all of a sudden stop making music because they graduated college. I mean, like it's like half and half where it's like I do understand it and I don't understand it because I'm like I understand, stop making music because you want to focus on your career, the one you went to college for. Yeah. At the same time, it's like these people are so insanely creative. Their music is so good and interesting to listen to that it is a shame that they stopped making music. Like there was one, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I can't remember the name, but I listened to one local band last night. There was like two people. It was a boy and a girl, I guess a man and a woman. I don't know. But they made music, and I think they're called Color Shy or something, Color Sky maybe. But their music is fantastic. But then all of a sudden you check their Spotify, it's like, oh, they released their album August 2021, and then that was the last thing they uploaded. And I'm like, this sucks because their music is so good. And I just couldn't believe how much talent had gone down the drain there. Which is why I want to get these, anybody that's listening right now, any local band where you're like, hey, I would love to be on the podcast, email me. Hit me on Instagram, on the Instagram or the Twitter or whatever, because I want to interview. I want to talk to you guys because college band and college music is such a fleeting, temporary art form that I want to get you guys, I want to capture you in this moment, and I want to know about you, what kind of music you make. I want to know your backstory, right? It's like the whole reason I'm doing this podcast because, I'd floated around the idea of making a podcast for like a year, maybe. It's something in the back of my mind, something I was very rarely actively thought about. It's just something I'm like, oh, that would be kind of cool to do. But the kind of podcast I want to do isn't just one of me talking, I don't want to do a podcast that's just me being like, hey, here's a funny joke, guys, I want to do a podcast where people actually learn things. They get introduced to local music, local artists, because that's like something that I think that I am really passionate about. The idea of a local band where, it's not some mega band, do you find it's not like you go on Def Leppard Spotify and they have like 40 million monthly listeners. This is a band that maybe has a maximum of 1,000 monthly listeners, and they're located within like 5 miles of me.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting just being able to talk and interview these people because they are so interesting, you know?
Yeah. And I know that those musicians and those people that are so interesting, they'll really appreciate you giving them kind of an outlet to talk about why they're doing the art they're doing, why they love it so much. I think that's a really valuable means of expression for them.
Yeah, like one of the spoiler alert, some upcoming guests that I've already got 2 other guest bands lined up to interview. I'm not going to spoil you guys, tell you what it is, but I've got 2 bands lined up, and one of them, I was talking to them because, it would be really hard logistically for me to have the entire band recording in, especially in the room that I'm recording in. It would be pretty difficult to have like 4 or 5 people in here. So, I'm messaging them on Instagram. I'm getting them on Instagram, and I'm like, hey guys, I can probably maybe only have like 1 or 2 of you. So they're like, okay, that's fine. So they're bringing in like, 2 members that they think that they want to be on the podcast. And I'm like, that's really cool. Like I would love to have both full bands on the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
But that is very like logistically hard because, it's 4 separate people that have 4 separate schedules. They're a college band, so they've got classes, homework, whatever. Yeah. So that's going to be really logistically hard to do. So that's why most of the time if I'm messaging people on Instagram or they want to be on the podcast, I'm like, hey, I'm probably only going to be able to have 1 of you. So it's like, I imagine then for a band, it's really hard because then it's like they have to send like a legislator to me. They have to send 1 errand boy to me that encompasses their entire band.
A representative.
Yeah, they have to send a representative for this band. And I imagine that's really, really hard to choose who you want to be on the band.
Yeah.
I imagine most of the time it's like, hey, we're gonna send like the lead singer or something. Because 99% of the time in a band,
it's the singer, yeah.
Not to sound rude, but like usually the spokesperson for that band is the lead singer.
Yeah.
Because that's something that most people are most easily able to identify with.
Yeah.
Like Queen, for example.
Queen again, yeah.
Most people only know Freddie Mercury.
By name, at least.
By name. The other 3 people, they may as well just be like background musicians for Freddie Mercury. Or like any band, the lead singer is going to be the most popular one. Like Harry Styles from like one.
He has a band.
Yeah.
Even after One Direction, like he has a whole band that are very talented people, but I don't know their names.
Yeah, people don't know their names. So that's why I imagine it's really hard for, to choose one person, one spokesperson for your band to be on the podcast.
Yeah, it depends.
But, we're about running out of time here. We're at about 1 hour and 4 or 5 minutes now. This is usually where I want to wrap it up, because I don't want to take up too much of other people's time. The person I'm recording with or even the people listening to this, I don't want to take up any more of their time. I don't think I could do like a 2-hour podcast. That's too much for me to do, right? So since we're about wrapping up here, where can people find you at? What are your socials, Spotify, whatever?
We're on Spotify as Navum, Navum. You'll know us because we have a picture of us lined up, 3 little dudes. I'm on Instagram at Joseph the Voyager. That's my personal. I also have a SoundCloud. I think it's just my name. It's just Joseph Wisnett, and that's where you can find me.
And I'll make sure to put all those links in the description of the YouTube video, the Spotify, eventually when we get on Spotify. As of recording right now, I'm not on Spotify yet, but I would, like to be in the future.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much, Joseph, for being on the podcast. Maybe eventually later on, have you on again in a few months, maybe. I don't know.
I hope so, yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time, boys and girls.